never lost faith that this case would be solved.
A shocking arrest today made on the other side of the country after the quadruple murder of 4 University of Idaho students last month.
Police now believe a current WSU grad student is responsible for the murders.
This is not the end of this investigation. In fact, this is a new beginning.
Tonight, what we know about the man police believe stabbed and killed the students as they slept inside their off-campus home.
I'm just kind of dumbfounded, that this could be going on right here.
And a community shocked to find out a possible murderer was living just a few doors down.
Tonight, we bring you complete team coverage right here on KREM 2.
There is a pending case now in court, and I in my office and the investigators have to live with the restrictions that our Supreme Court places on pretrial publicity. That said, I promise you we will share with you, through the court process or otherwise, whatever we are allowed to.
The Latah County prosecutor explaining the next steps in the quadruple murder investigation of 4 University of Idaho students following a breaking arrest on the other side of the country overnight. Good evening and thank you for joining us for KREM 2 News at 6. I'm Mark Hanrahan.
It's good to have you here. I'm Whitney Ward. Those murders and the investigation to find the killer drew national, even international attention. Tonight, police say they are one step closer, though, to closing this case. Pennsylvania State Police arrested 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger early this morning. He is now being held for extradition back to Idaho on first-degree murder charges. That arrest warrant was filed yesterday by the Moscow Police Department and the Latah County Prosecutor's Office.
Kohberger is also charged with felony burglary in Idaho. Again, he was arrested across the country in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, overnight. It has been just over 6 weeks since the murders in the off-campus home. In the dead of the night, the students were found in their home on King Road, just steps away from the University of Idaho campus. The bodies of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were found on Sunday, November 13th.
Then for 6 weeks, police have been extremely tight-lipped about the investigation. We know now the victims were found stabbed in their beds. Autopsies showed all 4 were likely asleep during the deadly attacks, although some of the victims did have defensive wounds, indicating at least some of them may have woken up and tried to fight back. From that very first day, though, this crime rocked the entire Moscow community and beyond.
We bring you team coverage tonight. Our Janelle Finch has been reading up on what we know about the suspect. Nathan Hyun is in Coeur d'Alene tonight, where a memorial service was held for 2 of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen.
First, though, we begin with Shannon Mowdy, who traveled to Moscow for that press conference with police today. She has a breakdown now from local law enforcement and what they had to say about today's arrest.
Not a lot of information coming out in that afternoon press conference today, and we have learned that a lot of what is being held back is because of Idaho law and the fact that suspect Bryan Kohberger is still in custody in Pennsylvania tonight.
I can tell you, for a lot of law enforcement, it was a fairly sleepless couple of days with as we were leading up to everything that we were doing. But what I can tell you is I have faith in those agencies across the nation. I have faith in our officers. I have faith in the FBI.
A day of mixed emotions in Moscow.
Sad to be here, but happy to be here at the same time.
As law enforcement confirmed the arrest of the man suspected of killing 4 University of Idaho students on November 13th.
A criminal complaint was filed yesterday here in Latah County, charging the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, with 4 counts of first-degree murder, in addition to felony burglary, which involves entering the residence with the intent to commit the crime of murder.
Under Idaho law, the details of what led police to Bryan Kohberger are sealed in a probable cause affidavit, which won't be released until he's served an arrest warrant in Latah County. In Pullman, police searched a Washington State University student apartment connected to Kohberger.
So we are still looking for all pieces of evidence, but we are still looking for the weapon. And I will say that we have found an Elantra.
Though Moscow Police Chief James Fry wouldn't comment on Kohberger's connection to the Hyundai Elantra, the 4 victims, or what led to his becoming a suspect. That information is in the sealed court documents. Kohberger's extradition hearing is set for January 3rd. Moscow police tell KREM 2 that process could take weeks or months. Chief Fry says this isn't the end of the investigation. They now want tips related to Kohberger.
I would say anything and everything. As we've said all along, we know what tips we're looking for. We will take those tips.
As the mystery in Moscow enters a new beginning.
While we cannot bring back Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, we can thoughtfully and purposefully carry their legacy forward in the work that we do.
We have also learned that the cleanup operation that started at the King Road home Friday morning has been put on hold. Chief Fry says that was at the request of the courts. In Moscow, Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
A suspect named and arrested in this investigation is certainly a major break in the case. Bryan Kohberger is now charged for 4 murders near the University of Idaho last month.
KREM 2's Janelle Finch is joining us now in the KREM 2 newsroom with what we know about the suspect.
Officials say the person responsible for the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students may be Bryan Kohberger. Since Bryan Kohberger's arrest this morning, we've learned he lived and went to school just a short drive from the crime scene. Moscow Police Chief James Fry confirmed Kohberger is a graduate student at Washington State University and a Pullman resident. This afternoon, WSU shared a statement following Kohberger's arrest. A quote from WSU Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton reads in part, "This horrific act has shaken everyone in the Palouse region. We will long feel the loss of these young people in the Moscow-Pullman community and hope the announcement today will be a step toward healing." KREM 2 located Kohberger's apartment building in Pullman. Today, crime tape was up around the complex and police were speaking to neighbors. We spoke to one of the people living here. He says it's disturbing to think he could have been living near someone capable of committing these crimes.
I'm just kind of dumbfounded, that this could be going on right here, or somebody could be conspiring to do something like that right here.
WSU officials say Kohberger completed 1 semester of the criminal justice program as a PhD student. Kohberger previously attended a private university out of Center Valley, Pennsylvania, where he received a master's degree in criminal justice. He is originally from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, roughly a 40-minute drive from where he was arrested today. An Idaho appearance from the suspect may not happen for some time, as officials work through the technicalities of an out-of-state arrest. In the meantime, Moscow police are continuing to ask for tips and for patience as they move forward in this new beginning of the investigation. In the newsroom, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
All right, Janelle, thank you. And as we work to bring you more to every story, we are getting reaction also from the community about this arrest. Bryan Kohberger has been a teacher's assistant and a graduate student in the criminology program at Washington State University in Pullman, just an 8-mile drive from Moscow.
Our sister station in Boise sat down with a WSU journalism professor, Matt Lovelace, about the situation at Washington State and the thought that a teacher and a student from the area is now accused in the killing of 4 students.
Certainly from some of the officers who I've known for 15 years before this incident, just a sense of relief. Today is a good day. That was from Police Captain Roger Lanier with Moscow. He just goes, today is a good day. And you could just see that relief, community-wide, law enforcement, everybody around here.
Matt Lovelace is a journalism professor at the Murrow School at Washington State University. He has navigated being a journalism professor in the midst of incredible tragedy while also reporting himself. Lovelace captured these shots of police on campus at Wazoo earlier, where they searched an office connected to the suspect, Bryan Kohberger.
Well, when the news broke that it was a WSU graduate student, certainly that sent a little bit of a personal shock to me. First thing I did was I came up to campus and I went there. He's got an office in Wilson Short Hall, and that building is closed down. Now, some context for that, we're at reduced operations for this week. And so just because of the holidays, most buildings are closed. I'm in the Murrow building right now. The doors are unlocked. So generally speaking, we can still get inside. They have that locked down. But just thinking about the fact that he, just a few hundred yards away from where I'm sitting talking to you now, this is my office, talking to people who work on campus, fellow faculty members, just the thought that he could have been here even before this happened. And certainly the unanswered question, which I posed right at the end of the press conference, is, did he come back to school? He was a graduate student. And, I'm not passing on any reports. I don't know for sure, but we want to know, did he come back to class? Did he finish out the semester? Was he here locally? That's sort of like a lingering, call it eerie feeling among all of us who teach here. And who knows, walked by him. What groups was he a part of here in town? Social groups. Did I play next to him, having a drink at Rico's? All those little things that sort of infiltrate your brain when you worked in the same place as the guy. After 7 weeks of internet sleuths going nuts about who's here and who did what. I mean, that has been a shocking revelation for today, even though it's not entirely impossible. This is one of the largest employers in the Palouse, and so stands a reason that he could have been here. But yeah, it's just wild to think about.
What was the scene at the apartment like for you? Is it pretty calm and quiet, or what was that like?
Yeah, fairly calm. A few members of the media there. What appeared to me to be a handful of residents from other units, just sort of standing outside, watching things going on. There wasn't a huge presence there. I mean, it's one of those apartment complexes where there's like a basement level and stairs to the first floor and second. We're full of those here at WSU. And so we just couldn't see much going on. They were taking some things out of the apartment and sort of putting it on a little mezzanine there. Weight off the shoulders for sure. And so I think to your question, it's just that, yeah, I think that there's an overwhelming sense of, I don't know if it's closure, because it certainly isn't that. Like, there's a lot left to figure out about this case, but it feels like the first time in a long time that there's been sort of a milestone other than reports of a Hyundai Elantra and, a few extra timeline details. This really feels like the first break in the case in large degree. And so, relief.
So that arrest today comes as a memorial service was already scheduled for 2 of those murder victims, Kaylee Goncalves of Rathdrum and Madison Mogen of Coeur d'Alene.
As Whitney just mentioned, the memorial was planned before word came of the arrest. Friends and family gathered at Lake City Church in Coeur d'Alene to remember the lives of these 2 young women. KREM 2's Nathan Hyun joining us live outside the church tonight with reaction from loved ones. Nathan?
Yeah, guys, a memorial today here at Lake City Church in Coeur d'Alene was definitely filled with a lot of emotions. I had a chance to go inside for a moment when it first began, and there were a lot of people crying and hugging each other. There were over 200 people inside celebrating the lives of Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. Family and friends shared emotional stories about the 2 college students through tears, and one person who attended says the memorial reminded her that life is precious.
It's a reminder that you need to realize that life is short and to honor and love your friends and family every chance you get.
Kaylee's sister and Madison's parents spoke during the memorial. Kaylee's sister described Kaylee as someone with contagious energy, and Madison's parents described her as someone who was always a bundle of joy. And I was also able to speak with Madison's godmother, who told me that she's not thinking about the suspect who got arrested today. She just wants to focus on the girls and their memories. Live in Coeur d'Alene, Nathan Hyun, KREM 2 News.
Nathan, thank you very much. Well, the arrest caps nearly 7 weeks of fear and frustration for the families of the victims.
Tonight, we are also hearing from the father of Kaylee Goncalves, who agreed to an interview for the first time.
This is the first bit of joy that we've had in close to 7 weeks. We hope that they've picked the right guy, and that gives us hope, and we haven't had hope for a long time.
Also today, we heard from Ethan Chapin's family, the only male victim in that quadruple murder. In a statement, they told us, "We are relieved this chapter is over because it provides a form of closure," they said. However, it doesn't alter the outcome or alleviate the pain. "We miss Ethan, and our family is forever changed." Over the last 7 weeks, we stood by the Moscow Police Department, FBI, and Idaho State Police. They said they were confident that they would solve this crime. So when we received the phone call last night, we congratulated them for their diligent work and service.
They continued saying, quote, "We remain grateful to the University of Idaho and the Sigma Chi fraternity for their ongoing support. We also appreciate the outpouring of kind words from so many others, which we'll need as we enter the next chapter of this nightmare. Today, we marvel at the continued stories about Ethan and the lives that he touched in his short 20 years. If we all lived and loved as Ethan did, the world would be a better place."
We also heard from Ethan's family in the very first week after those murders. At the time, they said they wanted the world to know they would remember Ethan as an outstanding young man and the light of their life.
He's the kind of kid that everybody wanted to be around. You know, he was just a good kid.
He's a good kid.
That
kind to all.
Didn't deserve what happened.
No.
Ethan had a twin brother and a sister who were all attending the University of Idaho. His parents had just visited all three of them the week before they were killed for Parents' Weekend. They said they are grateful for those last few days.
And as we pulled out of Moscow, we literally were like, we've done it. We've literally done it as parents. We've created three incredible humans that will go on. So we will not let this sink us or sink our kids. Because if anything, they have to go on and shine Ethan's bright light.
This is the first bit of joy that we've had in close to 7 weeks.
A sense of relief for the families of 4 murdered University of Idaho students. 7 weeks after the crime, the man accused of the killings will be in court tomorrow. Experts weigh in on what the process for getting him back to Idaho will look like.
My opinion on it is that he will likely be transported back to Idaho as soon as possible. I would think very likely it's going to be sometime this week.
Tonight, we have continuing coverage into what we know about the man accused of these brutal murders. Bryan Kohberger is scheduled to appear in Pennsylvania court tomorrow, where he's expected to waive his extradition hearing. But what does that mean in the overall process of getting Kohberger back to Idaho? I sat down with a criminal justice professor from Sacramento State University this afternoon to break down what lies ahead for the suspected Moscow murderer. We know from our sister station in Pennsylvania, Bryan Kohberger is behind bars at the Monroe County Correctional Facility. Officials brought him here after he was arrested early Friday morning. And here is where he'll stay until his appearance in a Pennsylvania court Tuesday, where his attorney shared he's planning to waive his extradition hearing.
Basically, all that means is that he is not planning to fight his transport back to Idaho. So he essentially will accept that transport back to Idaho.
Dr. Danielle Slakoff, an assistant professor of criminal justice at Sacramento State University, explains what this legal phrase means and why a suspect could choose to do this.
My take on waiving that extradition hearing is that he is ready to have his day in court to see the charges against him, because they have not actually released the information that they have leading to his arrest yet. So I really take that to mean that he's ready to see what they have on him, and he is hoping to be absolved of being absolved of guilt or blame.
In addition to sharing a plan to waive extradition, this weekend, Kohberger's attorney shared a statement on behalf of his client. He says, quote, Mr. Kohberger is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. Dr. Slakoff says the use of exonerated in the statement jumped out at her.
When someone's exonerated, generally that means they've already been convicted and sentenced. So it is an interesting choice of words by him, reportedly, that he used the word exonerated.
She says she's surprised he didn't use the word acquitted.
It's possible he could have said, I'm looking forward to being acquitted, which means being found not guilty.
In a court of law, suspects are presumed innocent until proven otherwise. And despite the noted interesting choice of words, Kohberger's attorney says at this time his client also deserves that presumption of innocence. Bryan Kohberger is expected to appear in Pennsylvania court tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 12:30 p.m. our time. Following that hearing, he will be transported to Idaho as early as this week. There, he'll face the first-degree murder and felony burglary charges against him.
Now, Kohberger's family and lawyer issued a statement on his arrest. The statement from the family reads in part, quote, first and foremost, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them. We will continue to let the legal process unfold, and as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. That's end quote. Kohberger's family says that they are fully cooperating with law enforcement in this investigation.
Looking back at the investigation, many were frustrated. When no suspects were named in the first days and then weeks, many felt police were hardly releasing any information to the public. Now, with the suspect behind bars, our Tim Pham takes a look back at how we got here.
On the night of Saturday, November 12th, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle went out in Moscow. Their roommates returned to their home around 1 in the morning on the 13th. Then around 1:45, Ethan and Xana returned from a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity that Ethan was a member of. About 10 minutes later, Madison and Kaylee got back to the house after going out to a bar and stopping by a food truck on the way home. 10 hours later, right before noon, a call to 911 reporting an unconscious person in the house. That call from a cell phone belonging to one of the surviving roommates. In the week that followed, we learned key details about their death. All had been stabbed, apparently while they slept, with the same fixed-blade knife, and police didn't know who did it. It was almost 3 weeks before the next major development. On December 7th, police said they wanted to find a white Hyundai Elantra that was seen near the home around the time of the murders. Fast forward to today, and finally an arrest on the other side of the country.
Tonight, we're also hearing from those who knew Kohberger. Our sister station in Pennsylvania spoke to one woman who says she grew up with him and knows him personally.
For people like Casey Arntz, the news of the arrest hit close to home. Her mom calling to break the news.
She said the person they arrested was Bryan Kohberger, and immediately I freaked out naturally. I went back inside work and I called about 8 of my friends because it was terrifying. It was a shock because there's literally 7 billion people in this world and I know him. I was friends with him. Like, that's terrifying.
Arntz lives in Virginia Beach but grew up in the Poconos and attended Pleasant Valley High School. She shared that she became friends with Bryan Kohberger through her younger brother during their time in school.
Arntz says she hopes his arrest will help shed more light on the case for the sake of the 4 students' families.
Cuffed and wearing jail garb, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students was led into a Pennsylvania courtroom today. Now investigators say they'll work to quickly get him back to Idaho to face charges in the students' murders.
So we're going to do our best today to talk about what phase we are currently in the investigation, and it has entered a new phase with the waiver for extradition.
Plus, newly released body camera footage shows the car investigators were searching for with the suspect behind the wheel. We have chilling new details of when the car was registered in Washington. Tonight we speak with an expert on what this all means and the next steps in the prosecution of this case.
In many cases, it takes years, and that's because investigations continue throughout after an individual is charged.
Our team coverage of the murders in Moscow continues tonight.
Arrangements currently are being made to deliver Kohberger back to Idaho, where he can have continued due process and face these charges.
28-year-old Bryan Kohberger has waived his extradition, which means he'll be brought to Idaho to face 4 murder charges and 1 burglary charge. A WSU criminology graduate student is accused of killing the 4 students in their off-campus home a little more than 7 weeks ago. We bring you complete team coverage tonight. Our Janelle Finch has more on what happened in the courtroom today as the suspect faced a judge. Nicole Hernandez breaks down new body camera footage of the suspect behind the wheel of a white Hyundai Elantra. Shannon Mowdy spoke with Eastern Washington's prosecuting attorney on the process of prosecuting such a case of this magnitude. And finally, Amanda Rowley is taking a look into questions that we still have about the case. But first, we want to head down to Moscow, where according to police, the suspect has 10 days to be brought to Idaho. So that means he could be here as soon as tomorrow or the end of next week. Our Kyle Simchuk joining us live in Moscow tonight as we wait for his arrival. Kyle?
Well, Kohberger's new home will be at the Latah County Jail right behind me once he's brought back to Moscow. But of course, the 28-year-old still thousands of miles in Pennsylvania. And Mark, as you mentioned, he could be brought back as early as tomorrow, but a judge says that extradition will happen within at least 10 days. So the big question now is how and when will Kohberger be brought back? Authorities tonight telling KREM 2 News that they're keeping that information a secret, citing security concerns. But as we've said, Kohberger could be here as early as tomorrow. And once he does return, he'll have an initial court appearance. And that's when that probable cause affidavit of facts will be released. And that'll be a treasure trove of information showing exactly what authorities, what evidence they've gathered in the house and what evidence they say they have against Kohberger. And once he makes that court appearance, KREM 2 will obviously be here. But today in Pennsylvania, he did tell a judge that he's not taking any medications and that his decision to voluntarily return to Moscow, that's his own decision. So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on when he returns. Send it back to you.
Kyle, live in Moscow tonight. Kyle, thank you very much. And today, Bryan Kohberger, the man suspected of killing 4 University of Idaho students, made his first court appearance. Kohberger and his attorney appeared before a judge at the Monroe County Courthouse. KREM 2's Janelle Finch joining us live in the studio tonight to tell us more about what happened in the courtroom and what's next for the suspected killer. Janelle?
Mark, since Kohberger was identified as a suspect in the Moscow murder investigation, the world has been watching for his next move. Today, he appeared in Pennsylvania court where he waived his extradition hearing. Now begins the process of getting Kohberger to Idaho. Bryan Kohberger, donning a bulletproof vest under a red jail jumpsuit, walked into the Monroe County Courthouse today. Here, he and his attorneys stood in front of a judge and waived his extradition. Doing this puts the wheels in motion to get Kohberger to Idaho, where he'll face first-degree murder and burglary charges. WNEP, our sister station in Pennsylvania, was in the courtroom where no cameras were allowed. They report every seat was filled, and Kohberger's family was in the front row. A CBS News correspondent says Kohberger remained stoic and calm while his mother and sister sobbed through the hearing. Following his first courtroom appearance, Pennsylvania State Police hosted a press conference to share more details on Kohberger's arrest.
Tactical assets were then staged in the county, in Monroe County, into the evening of Thursday, December 29th, last Thursday. And in the early hours of Friday, December 30th, those warrants were executed at the location. Mr. Kohberger was taken into custody without incident.
Officials say they understand the public wants to be informed, but sharing certain information could interfere with the court system's due process.
We're trying to balance essentially two things: the public's desire for information against the need to maintain the integrity of the investigation and protect the suspects, accused at this point's due process.
Upon waiving his extradition, court order says Kohberger will be in Idaho within the next 10 days. But as his Pennsylvania public defender told our sister station, Kohberger could be in Idaho as early as tonight or tomorrow. Following today's press conference, law enforcement says travel arrangements are being made. Moscow police say that they're keeping these details quiet for security reasons. In the studio, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
All right, Janelle, thank you very much. And new tonight, we have video connecting the Hyundai Elantra Idaho police were looking for to the suspected murderer. KREM 2's Nicole Hernandez has body camera footage tonight from a traffic stop with the suspect and chilling new details about the car's history. Nicole?
So you can actually see the trooper pull up and approach the car. Then you see Bryan Kohberger in the driver's seat right here just for a half a second. Quickly, the officer moves, leans down, and then obstructs the view of the camera there. There is another person in the driver's seat that we know is Kohberger's dad, but we are keeping him anonymous. Again, quickly, that officer does lean down, blocking the camera's view. But what's important to note is the date in the top right corner of this video from December 15th. That is 8 days after the Moscow Police Department started asking the public for information about a white Hyundai Elantra. And this new body camera footage is the second time law enforcement pulled over the suspected killer in the same day. Just minutes before, a deputy from Hancock County Sheriff's Department had stopped Kohberger and his dad. In a statement from Indiana State Police, they say the trooper did not have information on Kohberger at the time or the license plate number of the car Idaho detectives were looking for. And we also have a second angle from this traffic stop. That's right here. This is from the trooper's dash camera. From this, we were able to read the license plate on that white Hyundai Elantra. I used that license plate number to find the car's VIN number in an online database. Then with that VIN number, I found the car's Carfax, and that's what we're looking at right here. This shows the most recent owner bought the vehicle in 2019 in Pennsylvania, and then in 2020, just about a month later, registered that car in Pennsylvania as well. The owner then re-registered the car, got it serviced a few times since then. Then on November 18th of this year, right here is when we see the owner re-registered the car in Pullman, Washington to get Washington plates. That happened again November 18th, 2022, just 5 days after Kohberger allegedly stabbed all 4 students. We did reach out to the Washington Department of Licensing to confirm Kohberger is the one who is registered to this car. We have not heard back yet, but we do know he was the one driving the Elantra in that Indiana State Body Police camera footage. In studio, Nicole Hernandez, KREM 2 News.
Nicole, thank you very much. In our commitment to bring you more to every story, KREM 2's Shannon Mounty continues our team coverage tonight by digging deeper into a case of this magnitude. Shannon is live outside the federal courthouse in downtown Spokane after learning more about the legal process. Shannon?
I sat down with the U.S. District Attorney for Washington's Eastern District, Vanessa Waldroff, just to talk generally about prosecuting a case like this, one that is so high profile. Now, Waldroff says that cases like this that are large and complex, they can take some time to prosecute because the investigating doesn't stop once that arrest is made. And prosecutors actually work with investigators from right at the beginning, even before a suspect is identified. Waldroff says they treat every case, regardless of the public attention on it, as serious.
High-profile cases often are in the news, and people really are passionate about wanting to know more information. But honestly, we take every case equally seriously, and we'll be running down evidence and making sure there's a thorough investigation and viable prosecution on any case that we want to move forward with. And for every victim, every case is a high-profile case.
Now, Waldroff says that those cases take a long time, not only because they are still investigating, and investigators and the prosecutors want to make sure that they can provide a complete case to an impartial jury, but also on the defense side so that they have time to put their evidence and review all the evidence and provide a fair trial for the defendant. Live in Spokane, Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
All right, Shannon, thank you very much. And there are still a lot of questions surrounding the latest developments in this quadruple homicide investigation. So we continue our team coverage with KREM 2's Amanda Rowley tonight. She is live in the newsroom with what we're still tracking right now. Amanda?
Well, Mark, it's now been 7 weeks since 4 University of Idaho students were found stabbed to death in their Moscow home near the university campus. Now, with the arrest of a murder suspect, this brings up even more questions than before. So here are the top big 10 questions we're tracking right now. First off, motive. What is the motive behind the murder of the 4 students? What is the suspect's connection to the 4 U of I students? Are police looking for additional suspects or accomplices? How many other DNA profiles were found at the crime scene? What are the tips or evidence that led police to the suspect? What is the murder weapon? When will the cleanup at that crime scene begin? It was paused by the court. Details about the suspect's car. We want to know, will it be brought back to Moscow from Pennsylvania? What items belonging to the suspect did law enforcement seize? And when will the next Moscow Police Department press conference be? These are just some of the most pressing questions surrounding this case, which is why we continue to call on Moscow PD to share the latest details. Now, just minutes ago, Moscow PD sent out a press release saying because of a court order, a recent one just filed, the Moscow Police Department will no longer be communicating with the public or media about this case. Now, we're going to flesh out what this means and keep you posted. But in the meantime, today we also learned the search warrant for Bryan Kohberger's student apartment is now sealed. We obtained copies of the court order to seal it, and that order says it was sealed partly because of a serious and imminent threat to the privacy of witnesses, victims, and victims' families. The search warrant won't be unsealed until March. Now, we also know, based on the timeline released by Moscow PD, 2 of the students, it's Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves, went to the Corner Club in downtown Moscow the night before their death. There's been speculation that Kohberger was at that very same bar. But yesterday, the Corner Club tweeted this: suspect was not and has not been here. No one was removed from the bar the evening of the incident. Stop calling us. While numerous questions surrounding this case are still left unanswered, we remain diligent in tracking this information. Now, we do expect to learn some details once the probable cause documents are filed in Latah County. Reporting in the newsroom, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Amanda, thank you very much. The news that Kohberger will soon be in Idaho comes as the community continues to remember the 4 University of Idaho students whose lives were cut short. Those 4 students were 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, a freshman from Conway, Washington, Xana Kernodle, a junior from Post Falls, and 21-year-old Madison Mogen, a senior from Coeur d'Alene. Xana and Madison worked together at a restaurant in downtown Moscow, and 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves, a senior from Rathdrum, Idaho. She was a sorority member and had already lined up a job for after graduation. A little more than a month ago, a vigil was held for the victims where their parents spoke about the love they had for their children.
We are eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him
And I want to remind you that that's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back.
I'm so glad that she got to just have at least a little taste of what it's like to be in love with someone. And yeah, he's just a really great guy. And they treated each other the way you're supposed to. And yeah, I was really proud to just call him my daughter's boyfriend. And maybe someday, maybe they would have gotten married, you know. It seemed like it, at least.
It's a shame, and it hurts. But the beauty of the two always being together is something that it comforts us. It lets us know that they were with their best friends in the whole world. It's like a book. It's like some kind of terrible chapter, but there's beauty in it. And we're going to get our justice. We're going to figure this stuff out. This community deserves that.
A quadruple murder suspect soon to touch down on the Palouse as the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students is being transported from Pennsylvania to face charges.
This as new body camera footage shows a series of traffic stops during his trip across the country. Now the former defense attorney for Ted Bundy talks exclusively with KREM 2 about what could be next for the suspect.
I don't think people believe in the presumption of innocence anymore.
KREM 2 is bringing you in-depth coverage tonight as this high-profile murder case continues to unfold. Any minute now, we are awaiting the arrival of Bryan Kohberger, the suspect accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students almost 2 months ago. He was arrested last week in Pennsylvania. So take a look. Right now, you are looking live at a flight tracker showing a Pennsylvania State Police aircraft that took off earlier this morning. We have been watching it steadily make its way across the country, now toward the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. You can see it is currently flying over North Idaho, and of course, we are closely tracking the progress of this flight.
Yeah, just east of Lewiston right now. 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger waived his extradition rights, which means he'll be moved from a Pennsylvania jail to face 4 murder charges and 1 burglary charge in Idaho. Kohberger is a WSU criminology student who is also an assistant instructor who just completed his first semester in the program.
So we continue to bring you team coverage here on KREM 2 tonight. We have crews down in Moscow right now. Shannon Mowdy also spoke exclusively with the defense attorney of Ted Bundy to get his perspective on this type of case.
But let's begin with KREM 2's Amanda Rowley in Moscow tonight at the Latah County Courthouse, where we are still awaiting Kohberger's arrival. Amanda?
Yeah, Mark and Whitney, I've been standing outside the Latah County Jail and Courthouse, all in the same building here, since early this afternoon. I'm surrounded by several other media outlets waiting on the same thing. Now, once the suspect arrives here in Moscow, we're expecting law enforcement to drive him straight into that garage, that gray garage door, drive him back in there to get him booked into Latah County Jail. Once they start that project, we know that he will have booking information and a mugshot posted on the jail's website. And when that happens, he will be formally charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson previously explained to us what we can expect in upcoming court proceedings.
Once he gets here, he'll have an initial appearance with our magistrate. They'll deal with issues such as making sure competent counsel is representing him, and the case will be scheduled for further hearings.
Now, we also know that Magistrate Judge Megan Marshall presides over the county's initial appearance docket. So what that means is, as long as Kohberger gets booked into jail today, which again, he likely is, he should be in court for his initial appearance tomorrow morning. Now, in that hearing, he will be informed of the charges against him, but he does not have to enter a plea. In that hearing, they will also schedule the next his preliminary hearing, which is the next step in these court proceedings. Now, right now, we are expecting to learn more details about Kohberger's arrest once the Idaho arrest warrant is returned to the court and it's unsealed. They'll have some information about his arrest that we can share with you once that gets unsealed. In the meantime, the magistrate judge issued a non-dissemination order yesterday, and what that means is all law enforcement, investigators, and attorneys involved with this investigation are prohibited from speaking with the media any further about this case. We'll of course be staying in touch with them, and that is until that order is lifted. So we'll be keeping in touch with them as far as any updates they can share moving forward. For now, we'll be staying out here, keeping a close eye on the jail for the suspect's arrival. We'll give you updates as soon as we can. For now, reporting from the Latah County Jail, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Where are you headed?
We're going to well, we're coming from WSU.
And you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Well, we now have new body camera footage of a traffic stop in Indiana after receiving several videos yesterday from a different traffic stop. These from Kohberger's car during his trip from Washington to Pennsylvania.
Yesterday, we showed you video from an Indiana state trooper who stopped Kohberger for following too closely. And tonight we're seeing more body camera footage from a different stop that happened just before that one, also in Indiana. In the video, you can see a deputy with the Hancock County Sheriff's Office approach the white Elantra, similar to the one investigators had been searching for. The deputy then says Kohberger and his father were pulled over for following a van too closely. But something to note about the video was the date and the time, December 15th, starting at 10:41 a.m. This new video was the first traffic stop of the day. Kohberger was also stopped just 9 minutes later at 10:50, again by that Indiana state trooper, again also for allegedly following too closely. These two stops on December 15th happened 8 days after the Moscow Police Department started asking the public for information about a white Elantra. And for their part, the Indiana State Police told us yesterday at the time that trooper had no information about a crime or a search for a car in connection with the case in Idaho.
Now, with Kohberger behind the wheel, as you just saw, you could hear him bringing up a SWAT standoff in Pullman that had happened earlier that same morning. Take a listen.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that incident. Just yesterday, or?
This happened this morning. About an hour and a half ago. We're still wrapping it up for investigating. I'm not sure there's two shooters because they did shoot somebody.
Let's see.
And then we don't know about that actually. They were there with shooting.
Of note, it appears that Kohberger was not ticketed for either of those traffic stops. So to recap, murder suspect Bryan Kohberger was stopped twice in 9 minutes while he was in Indiana as he drove across the country roughly 2 weeks before he was arrested.
And if you would like to watch both of those body cam videos in their entirety, you can do so right now. Just go to our website, KREM.com.
Well, just as Kohberger is set to arrive in Idaho, students at the University of Idaho are also arriving back from holiday break.
Our Janelle Finch went down to Moscow today to speak with students and get their reaction to the investigation's latest developments.
I spoke to at least 15 students on campus today, and while most wouldn't go on camera, off camera, they told me they feel relieved with this development. They say they feel better about coming back to campus with more potential answers than when they left. When 4 University of Idaho students were murdered last November, campus was immediately affected. From canceled classes to students going home early for the semester, students ended the year unsure of what they'd be coming back to. But just as Moscow police say the arrest of Bryan Kohberger launched a new beginning of the investigation, people at U of I are also hoping for a fresh start in the upcoming semester. Seth Seipel is returning to campus after a semester abroad. Despite being hundreds of thousands of miles away, he says even he couldn't escape the news.
Having something like that happen to where I even heard about it from my school abroad, I mean, it's a big deal, and I couldn't imagine what people actually living on campus are going through, but having this wrap up before the next semester begins, I think, is a really good transition and turning point for everyone here. They're ready to start the beginning of this semester as they're fresh.
Seipel says in light of the tragic events that occurred while he was away, he says he was inspired by how campus came together to support one another and are continuing to lean on each other as the case develops.
I mean, I think events like these are tragedies, but the school spirit that's risen, the support from President Green and all the staff here at the school really shows that resiliency.
He says he's looking forward to finishing out his final semester on campus. University of Idaho students are set to return after winter break 1 week from today. And while some are relieved with the information of Kohberger's arrest, for others, it doesn't erase the feelings felt when news first broke that 4 students were murdered just steps away from campus. One Vandal mom told me her daughter's mental health is completely shattered and she won't be returning for this semester and may not be back on campus until next fall. In Moscow, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
Also, authorities believe they linked DNA found at the crime scene to Kohberger, the suspect, and it was thanks, they say, to DNA in an ancestral database.
DNA expert Dr. Greg Hampikian of Boise State University is in Europe today, but took some time to speak with our Andrew Bartline with our sister station in Boise about the DNA forensic process and how it could have been used to help solve this quadruple murder.
The crime labs are kind of behind the times. The genealogists have been doing this for more than a decade. The crime labs are just starting to do it.
Genetic genealogy, what is that exactly?
And so in this case, what it seems happened is they got some DNA. We don't know what from, maybe from an access point like a doorknob or a window. Once the DNA is sequenced, you can then take that file just like a consumer would to one of the genealogy sites that allows police to search public records of people who have opted in, saying, hey, if there's a murderer or a rapist in my family, I don't mind if you use my DNA to try to find them. I don't think it says exactly that, but there's an opt-in box. And enough people have done that if there is a Caucasian DNA sample, you have better than 70% chance of finding the family tree, last name, etc., of the person who left the DNA.
So if they don't get a hit in any of the, I guess, criminal databases of previously convicted criminals, they would then go to a commercial outlet where people would voluntarily submit their DNA to find out their own genealogy that way?
There is a company, Verigen, for example. I've worked with them, and they have a program for the police. It costs about $500 a file that the police want to say, hey, we have this file. There's no hit to the convicted offender database. We use the genealogy type of DNA. Here's the file. Can you send us relatives to this piece of evidence? Just like it was somebody looking for their long lost cousin. So after you get the genetic genealogy match, you get a buccal swab, a mouth swab from the person who is a suspect, and see if they match using traditional DNA methods. I imagine that in this case that they've probably already gotten that far through maybe a discarded cup or a cigarette butt or something like that. So they probably, for their probable cause, have already verified the match. But we'll see once it's unsealed.
I think a lot of people have this perception that DNA evidence is just a slam dunk land that we got the guy, but I guess through your work we've learned that that's not always the case.
The first time DNA evidence was reversed was a case that we worked on. Kerry Robinson out of Georgia, he was convicted with DNA evidence, and we showed that the DNA evidence in that case was bad. One thing I would point out is DNA is very, very good at telling us who might have been the original source of some biological material. It is absolutely, not good at telling us how material got somewhere. So if I, lend you my glove, you can leave my DNA somewhere. You need more than just the identification.
Welcome back. We are still tracking the flight of Bryan Kohberger, the suspect accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students. As you can see, the plane is slowly descending onto the Palouse right now. It's that yellow one right there. It's about 4,900 feet as of last check. We will continue to track Kohberger's arrival throughout our broadcast tonight.
In the meantime, as we keep one eye on that aircraft, KREM 2 is committed to bringing you more context to every story. That includes the challenges of handling a case of this magnitude. We want to go to KREM 2's Shannon Mowdy live in the newsroom right now. She spoke with a federal prosecutor today, as well as a seasoned defense attorney with high-profile clients about what goes into a case that has gotten this much attention already. Shannon?
From the beginning, the killings of 4 University of Idaho students drew the national spotlight. Now that a suspect is on his way back to Latah County to face charges, we are digging deeper into what the legal process may look like. I sat down to learn more about trying such a highly publicized case from someone who knows about high-profile cases.
Does that make it harder with all of that attention to defend someone?
Oh, of course.
Defense attorney John Henry Brown.
Nobody in their right mind back in the 70s and 80s would believe Ted Bundy might be innocent.
He defended convicted serial killer Ted Bundy. And even before the age of social media speculation, Brown says defending cases with widespread attention was difficult.
I think actually since the O.J. Simpson trial, there's been a presumption of guilt. I don't think people believe in the presumption of innocence anymore.
In Kohberger's case, some details have already come out, including the use of his DNA to identify him as the suspect. Brown says that could also make this a hard case to defend.
The minute they form an opinion like, okay, a car that's similar to his car is seen at the scene, and okay, there is some sort of DNA evidence. The minute the public hears that DNA evidence, I think everybody's mind is closed.
But protecting the rights of the accused doesn't solely fall on the defense team.
Every defendant is entitled to a fair and impartial jury, and that is, part of our obligation to ensure that we are doing all we can to protect the due process rights of victims as well as defendants.
Vanessa Waldorf is the U.S. Attorney for Washington's Eastern District. Speaking in general about prosecuting cases, she says prosecutors get involved long before an arrest.
So that involvement of the prosecution is throughout the investigation to ensure that constitutional due process is met.
Waldorf says preserving those rights for a defendant also takes time for both sides. That's why it could take years to see a case through.
There is continued investigation by the prosecution and law enforcement to run down leads that might be necessary in order to move forward with a fair and just trial. And all of those matters can take, additional time.
KREM 2 also reached out to Ann Taylor, who we have learned will represent Kohberger. As of last night, Taylor is under that non-dissemination order from a Latah County judge, which prevents her from commenting on the case, so we have not heard back. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
All right, Shannon, thank you very much. I want to take a live look right now. This is from one of our cameras at the Moscow-Pullman Regional Airport tonight. We believe one of these lights right here of this plane up in the air on the right-hand side of your screen is the one carrying Bryan Kohberger. He is the suspect accused of murdering the 4 University of Idaho students.
This is an aircraft that we have been tracking across the country all day today. We watched it make several stops in Indiana as well as South Dakota for refueling and whatnot to make sure that we knew as much about this aircraft as we could. We found out that it is owned by Pennsylvania State Police. This is the aircraft, again, that we believe Bryan Kohberger is on as he is being transported now from Pennsylvania back to Idaho to face 4 first-degree murder charges in the deaths of those 4 University of Idaho students.
Yeah, it's interesting. Authorities not commenting on if, in fact, he is on this aircraft. But as you mentioned, we've been tracking this specific aircraft. According to the flight tracker data we have been monitoring, it is owned, as you mentioned, by Pennsylvania State Police. And we've watched it throughout the day make different stops across the country. Again, this is all happening because Kohberger decided to waive his right to extradition. That means he's not fighting extradition. He wanted to come back, according to a defense attorney, a public defender there in Pennsylvania, to essentially see what is inside those court documents that right now remain under seal.
That is something that we will also be waiting anxiously to learn tomorrow. Once those documents are unsealed, that has to take place after his first court appearance in Idaho, which we believe will likely take place tomorrow morning. Of course, KREM 2 will be there, and once those documents are unsealed, we will learn more about how police were able to hone in on Bryan Kohberger as their suspect in this case.
Yeah, so what will happen here, a little context right now, he'll land and they'll be escorted from the airport, taken to the Latah County Jail, will be booked and processed. And then, assuming the court is closed at this hour, his hearing will likely take place tomorrow. And then after that hearing takes place, that's when we would expect at least those court documents to be unsealed, the probable cause affidavit, so we can see what evidence investigators say they have gathered so far against Kohberger.
A lot of people anxiously waiting for this aircraft to land, trying to see if it is in fact Kohberger who will emerge, and he is then taken to the Latah County Jail. We do also know, just for some context, that it was about 2 weeks ago that authorities were able to identify a white Hyundai Elantra as possibly a suspect vehicle in this case. We now know that this suspect did in fact have a white Hyundai Elantra registered in his name in Pullman, as he was a criminal justice PhD student at Washington State University. So 2 weeks ago, police started to say they were looking for this vehicle. We also now know that he presumably finished out the semester at Washington State University, and then at some point started making this trip from Washington all the way across the country to Pennsylvania. We saw 2 body cam videos where he was traveling with his father from Washington to Pennsylvania.
2,000+ mile trip he was making during the holiday break there. We can see the Pilatus aircraft. It's a prop-driven aircraft right here, touching down at the Moscow Pullman Regional Airport, We do know there was a large law enforcement presence there, so we expect this plane to essentially taxi, come to a stop at some point. The individuals on board, again, we believe that Kohberger is on this plane, will deboard the aircraft. They'll then be taken by law enforcement from the airport over to the Lake County Sheriff's Office, which is in the same facility as a jail right there, and that's where Mr. Kohberger will be processed. Again, the murders he is accused of committing happened more than 7 weeks ago in Moscow, back in November, on the 13th of November, and then last week on the 30th, on Friday, authorities announcing they had arrested Kohberger. We don't know officially exactly what kind of evidence they've had in this case in order to make an arrest. A lot of people are reporting a lot of different things, citing sources, but officially from Moscow PD tonight, we don't know exactly what evidence they say they have against him, at least right now.
And that is because of Idaho state law, which they say prevents them from talking to the media about anything in this case, which is why so many people are anxiously awaiting for his first court appearance tomorrow morning here in the state of Idaho, which then allows that probable cause statement to be unsealed and for us to get that first look at what ultimately led them to Kohberger as the suspect accused of killing those 4 University of Idaho students, one of the most high-profile cases this area has seen in quite some time.
You just don't hear about a quadruple stabbing homicide. I spoke with an expert in criminology, in fact, at Washington State University just a week after this happened, and she said, I can't ever remember hearing about a quadruple murder where a knife or an edged weapon, as police described it, being used to kill 4 people. So this case, of course, has gathered national, even international attention with outlets from across the country tonight. They are in Moscow. They have been tracking this flight across the country tonight. And we're, again, waiting to see Mr. Kohberger, we're presuming, on this flight right now. We know this plane is owned by the Pennsylvania State Police. It's been flying across the country since earlier today, starting in Pennsylvania, stopping in Illinois, stopping again in South Dakota, and now finally landing at the Moscow Pullman Regional Airport. You can see ground control right there kind of bringing them in. At some point, we expect this plane to stop, door to open, and the individuals to get out.
And what we know about the suspect currently is he is a 28-year-old PhD doctoral student at Washington State University in the criminal justice program. We don't yet know what connection, if there is any connection, to those 4 murder victims. We don't yet know, what might have been a motive. That's, of course, one of the big unanswered questions in this case right now. But we do know from his past studies that he was a criminal justice student for his entire undergraduate studies, as well as his master's, which he did receive his master's degree at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. His family lives still in Pennsylvania, and that is where he was arrested, was at his parents' home.
And if you're not familiar with this area, the University of Idaho, Moscow, Idaho, and Pullman separated by less than 10 miles. It is a short drive. Again, the crime happening in the overnight hours between the 12th and the 13th of November. At around noon, authorities got a call from another roommate who was inside the home on a cell phone, alerting authorities to the deceased individuals inside. And really, for several weeks, we didn't hear anything about any kind of potential suspect or really any leads. The biggest development came, I think, 4 or 5 weeks into this case when they announced they were searching for that white Hyundai. Again, that was a Hyundai Elantra they were searching for. We've seen from body camera footage that troopers and a deputy in Indiana both stopped that Hyundai on December 15th in Indiana for what they said the violation they stopped him for was following too closely. That was 2 weeks before he was eventually arrested on the 30th. So there are a lot of developments in this case. We're certainly trying to keep them all straight. We're going to stick with this shot to see if we can see the moment that the individuals get off this airplane. That's law enforcement right there. You can see standing by, waiting for them to get off of the plane. Oh, here they are. They're walking towards the aircraft right now. So we'll stick with this and see what we can see. It appears the door may be on the opposite side of the aircraft from what we can see right now. But again, this flight, it's been in the air since early this morning, leaving Pennsylvania, making a couple stops across the nation before just landing moments ago at the Moscow-Pullman Regional Airport.
And we do know all day long there has been an incredibly heavy police presence there at the airport, also at the jail, which is where we know he will be transported from the airport to the jail. We've also learned from the sheriff that they will do an initial assessment of the inmate to figure out where exactly he will be housed and under what conditions. We know that in Pennsylvania, he was under suicide watch. He was under constant supervision to make sure that he would be able to be assessed and that he would be able to be brought back to Idaho to face charges. So right now, we know that he left Pennsylvania this morning in Monroe County, which is where his family currently lives. And right now, it looks as though he has just landed. Those authorities anxiously awaiting the ability to bring him back to face those criminal charges. It has been a very lengthy investigation for the last 7 weeks, and they have been under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny from people not just in the Moscow-Pullman community, but way beyond.
Let's take this shot full if we can of the plane, because I believe we can see him right there in the red jumpsuit right there. That's what he was wearing yesterday in court, the red, and it appears he's being escorted by deputies to a car right there. Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students, now on the ground right now at the Moscow-Pullman Regional Airport. Appears he's been loading into a police SUV. Again, from here, he'll be taken over to the Latah County Jail where he'll be processed. And we would assume that he'll face a judge for his initial arraignment tomorrow, sometime tomorrow, because again, it's 6:30 in the evening. The court there closes, I believe, at 4:30. So the crews have already gone home from the courthouse. So that hearing will likely take place tomorrow. And then after that hearing, at some point after that, we would expect to have those probable cause documents unsealed. So we'll get a look finally at the evidence they say they have in this case.
A lot of different jurisdictional agencies have been involved in this. We know, obviously, Idaho State Police here locally, the Moscow Police. We also know the FBI was involved, and now Pennsylvania State Police also with the task of transporting him back to Idaho to make this exchange so that he can face those 4 first-degree murder charges, as well as at least 1 additional charge of burglary with the intent to commit a felony. And of course, we again are waiting for those documents to be unsealed in the morning after he is able to have his first court appearance in the state of Idaho. Because of Idaho state law, that is when those documents can be unsealed, and we will learn more about the evidence that Moscow Police and the FBI and Idaho State Police have been able to put together that linked this suspect to those 4 murders that happened 7 weeks ago now.
You're watching live footage. If you're just joining us right now, the plane carrying Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students, just landed within the past few minutes at the Moscow-Pullman Regional Airport. Mr. Kohberger deboarded the plane. He's being loaded into the back of what appears to be a police SUV right now, or a pickup truck perhaps. And from here, he'll be taken to the Latah County Jail to be processed. But really just a remarkable turn of events in the last really less than week. It's been 7 weeks since the murders, nothing about a suspect. Then on Friday, all of a sudden, police announcing they do have a suspect. They had arrested that person, Bryan Kohberger, 28 years old. Again, a PhD criminology student at Washington State University, just 8 miles away from where these murders allegedly took place.
We also know that as Moscow police were very tight-lipped about this investigation, at some points in that 7-week period, they were criticized. Perhaps people thinking that they weren't up to the task, weren't ready for a case of this magnitude. They have come back since and said they 100% stand behind how they conducted this investigation. They know that they had evidence and they had information that they withheld from the public. They did it on purpose. They didn't want anything to jeopardize this investigation. They wanted to make sure that they had their man, they said. Also, we have learned that for several days, this particular suspect, 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger, was under surveillance as they tracked him as he was driving from Washington all the way across the country to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, CBS News citing their sources saying they believe it was a DNA match through a genealogy website that ultimately pointed them towards Kohberger's direction. Again, when those court documents are unsealed, we'll be able to verify that independently. But the suspect just loaded up into the back of what I believe to be a police either pickup or SUV right there. And from here, he'll be taken over to the jail in Latah County to start the processing of this case. Kohberger did not fight extradition. He voluntarily was returned to Idaho tonight. And for us, at least, that means we'll find out sooner the evidence that investigators have against him.
As you can see, a very heavy police presence there at the airport at this hour. This is at the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport, which means they will now make that 8-mile drive to Moscow, where they will then take him to the Latah County Jail, and they will take him to the sheriff's office for processing. And then once he is inside the jail, that is where they will assess him as an inmate and figure out exactly where he will be housed within the jail and what that will look like moving forward as they prepare for his first court appearance in the morning.
Welcome back, everyone. If you are just joining us, the suspect in that quadruple homicide investigation involving those 4 University of Idaho students just landed at the Moscow Pullman Regional Airport. Just touched down there, was taken from the plane by deputies, presumably back to Latah County.
So we now know that, of course, that drive is an 8-mile drive from between Moscow and Pullman. So they are on their way to the Latah County Sheriff's Office and Jail, which is the same complex there in Latah County. That is where, as a prisoner, 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger will be processed first. He will be preparing to face those criminal charges in the morning. We want to turn now to KREM 2's Amanda Rowley, who is live there at the Latah County Jail. She has been there all day long waiting for this suspect to finally arrive. Amanda?
Yeah, Mark and Whitney, you can tell it's getting a little anxious out here. Now that we know the suspect has landed at the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport, he is now making his way this direction to the Latah County Jail. Again, behind me, we're expecting law enforcement. We can actually, if you want to take a look right here, right now, law enforcement are coming out. Looks like, I'm not sure which agency, but we are at the Latah County Sheriff's Office. This is where inmates through Latah County are housed. Not sure where they're headed, but this is an area we've been watching all day long. This is actually the most law enforcement presence I have seen. I can expect that they are just preparing for the suspect, his arrival here to the jail. We're expecting that law enforcement will drive him into the gray garage. You can see that gray door on the side of the jail facility. We've been watching that all day, waiting for his arrival. Looks like these officers are making their way back into the jail. Take a look, though. We do have some video of the suspect, potentially that plane that he was transported on at the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. That is where law enforcement from Pennsylvania have transported him. It's been a full day ordeal waiting for this suspect to arrive here in Idaho. Now, when he does get here to Moscow, to the Latah County Jail, that's when he'll start the booking process. We know that when he's booked, it's going to be he's going to go through an analysis process. That's according to Sheriff Skiles here. They'll book him and they'll post his booking photo on the jail's website. Again, this is all that's really going to happen today. He'll be booked, but then after that, he'll make an appearance in court tomorrow morning. Come back out here. Like I said, I am surrounded by several media outlets. We're all waiting anxiously and watchfully for that arrival. I'll send it back to you guys, Mark and Whitney.
A quick question for you. You went to school down in La Pelusa at Washington State University. For viewers who are maybe not familiar with that area, can you describe just the proximity between WSU and the University of Idaho and how close these two communities are to each other?
Oh gosh, I mean, as a former WSU student, we would come to Moscow on the weekends. It's just a short jaunt, a donkey ride really, from Pullman. The communities are so close. I covered several stories as a student reporter for Moscow City Hall. You can tell that they're very closely connected, just as Pullman and Washington State University is. They make legislative decisions based on their interactions with the university community. It's a very tight-knit town, tight-knit university, and hand in hand they make decisions together almost. And it's a small town, though. I mean, I'm at the courthouse, Latah County Courthouse. Just walking down the hill puts me at the main strip for downtown, and a couple blocks north from me is City Hall, so everything's pretty close knit, even geographically as well.
You have also been in close contact with law enforcement there in Latah County throughout this entire investigation, as well as today. You touched on it a little bit, but tell us more about what you know about the process that he will be going through tonight as they process him to become an inmate there at the jail.
Yeah, it's a question that I've seen on social media from a lot of people highly interested in this case. So again, once the suspect arrives here, he'll be booked. They'll go through an analyst process to figure out what's the best condition or best situation to put him in once he's put into the jail. They'll get his booking photo. Washington and Idaho have different booking photo laws. In Idaho, they will publish and allow mugshots to be published to the public. So we'll be able to see that. And then once he's booked, it's a matter of waiting until tomorrow morning when he'll make his initial appearance. That initial appearance in court, again, is expected to appear in the morning, potentially the 9:30 docket. In that hearing, that is when he'll be informed of his charges, but he does not have to make a plea. He'll also be appointed an attorney if he hasn't already appointed one or can't afford one. And then they will schedule the preliminary hearing, which is the next hearing after the initial hearing. So just a lot of procedural. The big thing that we'll get tomorrow after this, after he's booked, we're hoping to get those search warrants, the Idaho arrest search warrant, returned to the court and unsealed. So that may reveal some details we've been waiting for that gives some light to the law enforcement arresting the suspect.
And paint a picture for us, Amanda, real quick. There where you're at, the Latah County Jail and the court, they're basically the same facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to ask my photographer, Will, maybe to give you guys a look around. So yes, it's all in the same building. So what you're looking at here on the left side is, it's an L-shaped building. The left side is the Latah County Sheriff's Office and jail. When you head to the right, that is where the Latah County Courthouse is. You can kind of see a much taller building with a few more floors. That is the courthouse. That he'll be going directly there into, we believe, courtroom 1 tomorrow morning for his initial appearance. And so, yeah, it's all housed in the same facility, same building. Again, this is a small county, so everything's pretty close together here. Judge Magistrate Megan Marshall is the judge presiding over the initial appearance, and her courtroom typically is held in courtroom 1. I tweeted a picture of where that's located, just next to the clerk's office, feet away from where we're at right now.
Amanda, when those Idaho State troopers kind of walked out of that complex when we first came to you here, we also got a glimpse of all of the media that are just lined up. I know you're in that line there of all the people lining up. What has it been like? Just kind of give us a sense of the media scrutiny and media attention that this case is already receiving as people are watching across the country and really around the world waiting for this suspect to get to where you are.
Yeah, it's kind of ebbed and flow as far as the media presence here throughout the day, Whitney. When I got here early this afternoon, there was kind of a big huddle for the morning watch, anticipating the suspect's arrival. But as now that we've learned the suspect has landed and is en route, being transported to the jail, it's a bit crowded. We have some wiggle room here, but we're not totally like sardines. I will say though, while there is a significant media presence here, we've also seen some community members come through. They want to know what's going on, what the buzz is about. Of course, many are aware that the suspect is being brought here to Moscow today, but we have been approached by some public members asking, what's the update? What do we know? What can we expect from today? And so we're just happily sharing that information, the public information that we've learned so far today. But overall, the tone has been respectful, keeping clear of public right-of-ways and being respectful of the significance this really has on the community today.
Welcome back. We continue to track that breaking news of murder suspect Bryan Kohberger arriving there at the Latah County Courthouse. Our
reporter Amanda Rowley is standing by live waiting for this arrival. We want to go to her live now.
Hi, Mark and Whitney. Yeah, this is me. We actually just watched the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, arrive here. It was a very quick entrance. If you can see at the front doors to the sheriff's office, there are some law enforcement officers. It looks like maybe Idaho State Police troopers who are standing outside. Those were the gentlemen that we saw earlier this evening. But man, just in like a matter of seconds, we saw 2-3 law enforcement vehicles coming into that gray garage. They were very quick about it. The door opened, the car went in, and they immediately closed the door. We didn't really even get a glimpse of the occupants of the vehicle. That one vehicle that went in the garage, and another patrol car remained outside and has now pulled off. Again, we do see law enforcement standing outside the main entrance to the Latah County Sheriff's Office. But again, it was a very brief, very quick and unexpected arrival here. We were expecting it, but gosh, it came up on us very quickly. We'll send it back to you.
Amanda, this does seem to just kind of demonstrate the law enforcement presence at every step of this process, how many different agencies are involved, and how carefully they are handling this transfer of a prisoner, and how much they want to do this by the book so as to not jeopardize any aspect of this investigation. As they have said, the only way to really honor the 4 victims who were murdered, since they cannot come back, they cannot be brought back, that to have a successful prosecution is the only way they can do that. You are certainly seeing, I think it looks like, a heightened level of law enforcement presence.
Oh, 100%. And just to detail even more, so when these 2 patrol cars came through, there were no sirens. I will say there were no sirens, but they had lights on. So there was an immediacy, but you kind of tell maybe some of a stealth approach maybe to keep this locked down, but also secure. But to your point, yes, there are several agencies involved and working their hardest to keep this on wraps and doing it by the book. We know that Moscow PD is heavily involved. They're the ones investigating. They've had resources come in from Idaho State Police, the FBI, and even now the Latah County judge issued an order, essentially in layman's terms, a gag order for law enforcement and attorneys to really keep this case under wraps and make sure that nothing taints it any further or jeopardizes a conclusion to this case. Mark and Whitney.
We are trying to get some video turned around of the suspect's arrival, Mr. Bryan Kohberger's arrival there at the jail right now. But just to recap, this has been a long process. More than 7 weeks ago, these 4 University of Idaho students were found murdered in a home just off of campus, all stabbed to death, according to police. For several weeks, there was no information or anything mentioned about a potential suspect. Then just last Friday on the 30th, police announcing they'd made an arrest in the case all the way in Pennsylvania. Come to find out, that suspect was actually a doctorate student at Washington State University who, according to the Seattle Times, after the murders took place, he's accused of committing, actually went back to school to finish out the remainder of that semester. And he actually was an instructor for younger students as part of that program, which is an interesting twist in all of this. To this point, we don't have any information regarding the official evidence police have on this case. CBS News, citing their law enforcement sources, they say it was a hit within a genealogy website that ultimately led them to this suspect. But again, we don't know where they got the suspect's DNA from or how they got that DNA. That's one of the things we're waiting to find out. Also, the police chief there with Moscow PD saying they still haven't recovered a murder weapon. They're still hoping to find that murder weapon, and they're hoping to get tips from the public. They say so far they've received about 19,000 tips in this case, conducted about 300 interviews. So this has been a long, drawn-out process just to get here. And this is a new chapter right now with the suspect now back in Idaho.
This is their first opportunity to see the suspect, to be able to question him the way they have wanted to. We know that he was arrested on Friday in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, and he did not fight extradition, which means that he was able to be brought back to Idaho to face charges relatively quickly. It could have been a much more drawn-out process had he chosen to fight extradition. He did not opt to do that. He said he wanted to see what the evidence was that they had against him. That's one of the reasons why he said that he did not fight that extradition. So this is something that we hope to get more information about tomorrow morning, believing that he will have his first court appearance in Latah County in the morning, and that those court documents, the probable cause statement, the arrest warrant, the information in those documents will then be able to be unsealed once he has his first appearance in the state of Idaho. And that is when we will get our first opportunity to examine those documents and understand what led them to him as a suspect.
Where we have some video, I understand, right now of the suspect arriving there at the scene. This is actually of him landing at the Moscow Pullman Regional Airport. He's in that red jumpsuit you can see. He's kind of flanked by deputies at each of his side. He landed earlier tonight, just about 6:10 or so, I would say, if I was to guess. They took him off the plane, then walked him over to a police vehicle, loaded him up, and then made the short trip over to the Latah County Jail. We are still waiting to hear things like a potential motive for this crime. Why did he allegedly commit this crime? We don't know about any connection he potentially had between himself and any of the victims. A lot of questions still unanswered, but at least tonight the suspect is back in the jurisdiction where he's accused of committing the crimes in.
This has been a very lengthy process throughout the course of this day as he was in Monroe County, Pennsylvania this morning. It was a very long flight. They stopped 2 times in 2 different states as they made their way across the country today to bring him back to Idaho. And you saw it was actually a fairly streamlined process getting him off the plane, into the vehicle, back now to the Latah County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life.
Less than 24 hours after arriving in Idaho, a quadruple murder suspect appeared before a Latah County judge for the first time.
It's obviously an emotional time for the family, seeing the defendant for the first time.
With the suspect in Moscow, court records are now unsealed, revealing shocking new details about the hours during the night of the murder.
DNA evidence emerges and police say it links the suspect to the crime scene. Tonight, in our commitment to bring you more, we talk with an expert in genealogy about the role DNA will play in this case.
We are indeed shedding our DNA everywhere we go.
We have in-depth team coverage outlining the details we know at this hour and where the case goes from here.
Nearly 2 months after those murders, a suspect in the case made his first court appearance in Idaho after waiving extradition in a Pennsylvania court. Following his appearance here in Idaho today, new court documents were released unveiling a timeline of what police believe happened the early morning hours that murder was committed.
This comes less than 15 hours after the suspect touched down on the Palouse last night and was booked into the Latah County Jail.
And we are bringing you team coverage here on KREM 2 tonight. We have crews down in Moscow and Pullman as we bring you more to every story. We're breaking down the new timelines of that evening and talking with experts about this case.
Let's begin tonight with KREM 2's Amanda Rowley, who is in Latah County at the courthouse to recap the suspect's first appearance today.
This initial appearance was very quick and the courtroom was completely full of members of the media. But sitting in the front row was the family of Kaylee Goncalves, one of the murdered University of Idaho students. Now, during the hearing, the suspect showed no emotion and said very little, meaning he only responded to questions the judge had for him.
The man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students appeared for the first time in Idaho court. Bryan Kohberger is charged with 1 count of burglary and 4 counts of murder. In his initial appearance hearing, the magistrate judge read through each of those charges.
Do you understand?
Yes.
The max penalty for each count of murder in the first degree is death or life in prison. Kootenai County's chief public defender, Ann Taylor, is representing the suspect. She was also the defense attorney in a high-profile case 17 years ago in North Idaho. Jonathan Ellington went to trial twice in a fatal road rage case and was eventually found guilty of murder and aggravated battery.
I have court-appointed counsel.
Kohberger's attorney argued against him being held in jail without bond, but Latah County prosecutor Bill Thompson told the judge Idaho law does not entitle the suspect to a bond because of the charges against him, adding that he was arrested across the country from Moscow. The judge decided Kohberger will remain in jail without bail. She also gave the suspect a no-contact order, which prohibits him from having any contact with the victims' families, friends, and the surviving roommates. Shortly after the hearing this morning, the attorney representing the Goncalves family commented on their behalf.
It's obviously an emotional time for the family, seeing the defendant for the first time. This is the beginning of the criminal justice system, and the family will be here for the long haul.
Today, I also checked in at Mad Greek, the restaurant where Madison Mogen and Xana Kernodle worked. The staff say they do not recognize the murder suspect or recall serving him.
Now, here's what we can expect in the upcoming court proceedings. A status hearing is scheduled for next Thursday at 10 a.m., and this is at the request of the suspect's defense attorney. Now, Kohberger's preliminary hearing is not yet scheduled, but it must happen within the next 2 weeks. At that hearing, he will enter either a not guilty or guilty plea. Reporting from the Latah County Courthouse, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Now, we have known the murders happened in the early morning hours back on November 13th.
So now we are getting a much more detailed look at what investigators believe played out and some of the evidence left behind. We now know investigators believe the deaths happened between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Police say Xana Kernodle had received a DoorDash order at the house right around 4 a.m. Cell phone data also shows she was likely awake at least until 4:12 a.m.
Before this, a surviving roommate who lived in the house told police something woke her up at around 4 a.m. And by 4:20 a.m., police say a vehicle matching the description description of the white Hyundai Elantra was spotted speeding away from the scene. 18 pages tell terrifying details of the early morning hours of November 13th, including pinpointing the time of the alleged murders. The affidavit also describes how forensic evidence and video brought into focus a suspect and his movements before and after the crime. But some of the most startling information comes from one of the two survivors inside the home at the time of the murders. In the document, the roommates are not identified by name. Both roommates telling authorities the 4 victims were all home by 2 a.m. and in their rooms by about 4. But the document also tells the story of how one survivor reported coming face to face with the suspect. One of the surviving roommates told investigators that at about 4 a.m. in her room on the 2nd floor, a noise awoke her. She thought it sounded like Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog on the 3rd floor. A short time later, the roommate said she thought she heard Goncalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Next, court documents show she opened her door but didn't see anything. Authorities say it could have been Xana Kernodle talking as she was on TikTok at approximately 4:12 and still awake. The roommate then stated she opened the door a second time after hearing what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. She explained she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." About 5 minutes later at 4:17, a nearby security camera picked up audio of what sounds like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. Also, a dog can be heard barking numerous times. The roommate states she then opened the door for a 3rd time after she heard crying and then saw what she described as a figure clad in black clothing and wearing a mask that covered his mouth and nose. She told authorities the man walked right toward her. She described him as being about 5 feet 10 inches tall, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. She stood in what she described in the document as a frozen shock phase. In her statement, she said the man walked past her and toward the sliding glass door. And that's when she said she locked herself in the room after seeing the man. Investigators believe the suspect then left, leaving behind 4 victims and a trail of evidence that ultimately led them to Bryan Kohberger. According to Moscow police, the initial 911 call was made 8 hours later at 11:58 a.m. on Sunday, November 13th. On that morning, one of the surviving roommates asked some of their friends to come to the house because they believed one of the 2nd floor victims had passed out and was not waking up.
Also released in that affidavit today, our first confirmation from police that a suspect DNA profile was found at the scene.
KREM 2's Shannon Mowdy breaks down what we have learned about that piece of evidence. Shannon, how it led to Kohberger. Shannon?
From that 18-page document publicly released just hours ago, we learned police found a knife sheath on the bed next to Madison Mogen. That is a piece of evidence that held a minuscule clue with huge significance. For the first time, police have confirmed the role DNA played in identifying their suspect, Bryan Kohberger. The 18-page affidavit says Idaho's state lab found a single source of male DNA, labeled suspect profile, on the button snap of a knife sheath left at the crime scene.
The reason DNA is so compelling is because it is a unique signature. Unless you have an identical twin, no one has your exact DNA.
Cece Moore is the chief genetic genealogist with Parabon. She pioneered the genetic technology used in solving cases like the Golden State Killer. The techniques can crack a case with a tiny sample of DNA.
Based on the affidavit in this case, it looks like touch DNA is likely what they had to work with. That's just skin cells.
Kohberger's affidavit shows 3 days before his arrest, December 27th, Pennsylvania agents took trash from his parents' home in Albrightsville.
The Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, has ruled that when we throw something away, we are abandoning that. So we are abandoning our DNA everywhere we go. And it has been ruled, at least so far, that that's fair game for law enforcement.
That garbage was sent to the Idaho State Lab, and within a day, the lab had another DNA profile.
It certainly appears that they retrieved his father's DNA from the trash.
Investigators report at least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. So can you break that down for me?
Those are the ones that we hear in court. Those are the ones we hear law enforcement using as evidence that there's a 1 in huge number chance that anybody else could be that DNA contributor or be the parent of that DNA contributor.
Namor tells me mention of any genetic technology possibly used in this case was correctly and probably on purpose left out of the affidavit because it's only a tip, not what actually leads to an arrest. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Shannon, thank you very much. Investigators reviewed footage from security video in the victim's King Road neighborhood.
So there were several sightings of that Elantra between the hours of 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. The same car drove by the house 3 different times. Officials say it is normally a very low traffic area, especially in those early morning hours. The 4th time the car arrived was around 4:04 a.m. It could be seen on surveillance video trying to park in front of the house, but eventually driving eastbound down Queen Road.
Police say the same car speeds away at around 4:20 a.m. It drives down Walenta Drive. After that, police believe the car then left the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Conestoga Drive. That route eventually leads back to Pullman, Washington.
And KREM 2's Nathan Hyun has been tracking all of the locations where documents say Kohberger's car was spotted.
Yeah, that's right, guys. I'm here at Bryan Kohberger's apartment in Pullman, and we learned from the court documents revealed today, police gathered surveillance video that they believe tied Kohberger to multiple locations in Moscow and Pullman. On the day of the murder at 2:53 a.m., WSU surveillance cameras spotted a white sedan traveling on Nevada Street towards SR 270, which connects Pullman to Moscow. Police say that after the car left Pullman, cameras put the suspect's car in Moscow driving on Indiana Hills Drive, about 1.5 miles away from the victim's house. This was approximately at 3:26 a.m. Just 3 minutes later, video shows the suspect's car arriving here on Queen Road close to the victim's residence. And later in the report, we learned that the car exited and came into this area 4 times, trying to park at this residence. Police say video then shows at 4:20 a.m., the car exited the area at a high rate of speed. After leaving Moscow, documents show a WSU surveillance camera spotted the suspect's car driving north on Johnson Road at approximately 5:25 a.m. The affidavit says that 5:27 a.m. is one of the last times a camera spotted the white Elantra on the day of the murder, right here at Stadium and Cougar Way. We also learned from the affidavit that Pullman police tracked down the suspect's car to these apartments right here on November 25th. And when Pullman police tracked the plates on that car, Bryan Kohberger appeared as the registered owner. In Pullman, Nathan Hyun, KREM 2 News.
Since the murders on November 13th and in the weeks following, police say they combed through hours of video evidence and received thousands of tips. And today we have learned police may have been closer to catching a suspected killer than we originally thought.
KREM 2's Janelle Finch is joining us from the newsroom now with a breakdown of what police knew and when compared to what they were telling the public. Janelle?
Mark and Whitney, throughout this investigation, Moscow police held a lot of information close to their chest. In the affidavit documents released today, we learned Moscow PD may have been ready to catch a suspected killer in as early as 2 weeks following the crime. Moscow police discovered the bodies of Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee in the afternoon on November 13th. Police confirmed the discovery launched a homicide investigation. Days later, autopsies revealed the 4 students were murdered. Police held their first press conference on November 16th, 3 days after the murders.
The reality is, I probably should have been standing here a day or so ago.
We know the murders occurred in the early morning hours of November 13th. But in Thursday's probable cause affidavit, we learned police obtained a knife sheath from the crime scene that same day. 2 more press conferences on November 20th and November 23rd. November 25th, MPD alerts local law enforcement to keep a lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra, a potential lead the public wouldn't know about until 12 days later. But it was on November 29th, just 4 days later, that Washington State Police would find a 2015 Elantra registered to Bryan C. Kohberger, living in Pullman, Washington. December 6th begins a string of pre-recorded interviews from Moscow Police Department leadership. December 7th, Moscow police asked the community to send in tips about white Hyundai Elantras made between 2011 and 2013. For 10 days, the police department continues to release pre-recorded interviews and ask the public for tips. The affidavit says on December 23rd, police used cell phone data to determine Kohberger's location during the murders, noting it goes off network between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m., November 13th. December 28th, an Idaho state lab confirms DNA from Kohberger's family's trash can in Pennsylvania is a match with the DNA on the knife sheath left at the crime scene. Pennsylvania police say officers were sent to Kohberger's Pennsylvania residence late December 29th. That same day, Moscow Police Chief James Fry shared a pre-recorded interview saying crews would be cleaning out the King Road home. December 30th, Pennsylvania State Police arrest Kohberger. And hours later, Moscow police hold a press conference announcing a suspect has been arrested. The documents detailing evidence gathered against Kohberger was not released until his first Idaho court appearance, Thursday, January 5th. Time and time again for the last 2 months, Moscow police told the community they knew people wanted more immediate details and answers. And while we didn't have a lot of the key points in the internal investigation until today, it's possible keeping information as quiet as they did is what led to the successful arrest of suspect Bryan Kohberger. In the newsroom, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
But just before Kohberger appeared in court this morning, we received shocking new details about what happened the night of the murders from newly unsealed court documents.
Inside that 18-page affidavit, a chilling new timeline unfolds. Tim Pham is here now with a breakdown of those details.
We have been reading over this document since it was first released just before 9 o'clock this morning, and it's a lot to break down. So let's start off by taking a look at the new timeline that investigators laid out in the affidavit. We've known the murders happened early in the morning on November 13th, but now we are getting a closer look at what investigators believe played out. The new details lead investigators to believe the deaths happened between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Here's what happened starting at 4 a.m. according to the affidavit. Police say Xana Kernodle received a DoorDash order at the house at about 4 a.m. Cell phone data also shows that she was likely awake and using the TikTok app at 4:12 a.m. A surviving roommate who lived at the house, referred to as DM in the court documents, told police something woke her up at about 4 a.m. but thought it sounded like Goncalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. At 4:17 a.m., a security camera in the area picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. At 4:20 a.m., a vehicle matching the description of the white Hyundai Elantra was spotted speeding away. A vehicle matching the description was seen again just before 5:30 a.m. on cameras in Pullman, Washington. This, of course, is only a brief overview of the timeline. You can read a more detailed account of what investigators believed happened on KREM.com. In the studio, I'm Tim Pham, KREM 2 News.
And that same surviving roommate who heard movement inside the house that night gave police a chilling account of what she saw that night.
The roommate's bedroom was right by Xana Kernodle's, and she told investigators that she heard and saw several things throughout those early morning hours. Channing Curtis has more on her eyewitness account.
Now, we have been poring over these court documents since they were released just before 9 this morning. In the affidavit, one of the surviving roommates gives police a chilling account of what happened on the morning of the murders, and it's absolutely terrifying. This roommate's bedroom was right by Xana Kernodle's, and she told investigators that she heard several things throughout those early morning hours. The affidavit says this roommate told investigators sometime after 4 a.m. she thought she heard crying coming from Xana's room and heard a male voice say something like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Then that same roommate says they opened their door for a third time that morning and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She says that male walked past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase. She says the male walked past her towards the back sliding glass door. She then locked herself in her room. That roommate also told investigators that she didn't recognize the person, but she did give police a detailed description of what they looked like. That description, along with cell phone records, area surveillance cameras, and a DNA match, all led police to arresting Bryan Kohberger. In the studio, I'm Channing Curtis, KREM 2 News.
We also know the suspect had firsthand knowledge of police data tracking and capabilities.
Kohberger had been studying criminology for a decade in college, and as part of his studies, we've learned he often did research on how to commit a crime.
Moscow police learned early on that suspect Bryan Kohberger had an above-average understanding of police investigative tactics. According to court records, Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. We know he received an associate's degree in psychology at Northampton Community College in Pennsylvania in 2018. He then went on to DeSales University, also in Pennsylvania, for his bachelor's degree, then his master's degree in criminal justice. It was at DeSales we learned he studied under renowned criminal psychologist Katherine Ramsland, whose books included The Mind of a Murderer and How to Catch a Killer. In May, just before he graduated, authorities confirm he posted this Reddit survey asking participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. He asked questions like, how did you leave the scene? How did you accomplish your goal? And how did you approach the victim? Investigators also now know Kohberger applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Documents state Kohberger wrote in his essay he had interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. During his time at Washington State University, Kohberger was listed as the teaching assistant for 3 undergrad classes in the Criminal Justice Department. He completed 1 semester in WSU's PhD program before he was arrested.
It has been more than 7 weeks now since the murders of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves.
So we want to take a look now at how we got here today. The 4 students were found the morning of November 13th inside their home just off of campus. Further investigation, interviews, and security camera footage revealed the hours leading up to the victims' deaths.
That first week in the investigation revealed some key details. All 4 victims have been stabbed, apparently as they slept, with the same fixed blade knife, and police didn't know who did it. The next development didn't come for 3 weeks until police released that they were looking for this white Elantra, similar to this one, seen near the home around the time of the murders.
We have since learned on December 15th, Kohberger was stopped twice while driving through Indiana for following too closely. Then last Friday, December 30th, he was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania.
Last night, 28-year-old Kohberger arrived on the Palouse, and today he made his first court appearance as a Latah County judge denied his bond request. We now look toward his next hearing, which again is set for next Thursday.
And this continues to be a developing story. We will bring you updates as we learn more.
In the meantime, for all of our coverage on this story, you can just text us the word Idaho to 509-448-2000, and we'll send that link directly to your phone.